Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
Let the dogs out. You know, like, who let the dogs out? Who?
Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com, your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. Always available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Always available wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Here we go. We're off and running on this beautiful Tuesday. A little chilly, not too bad. Caleb Calhoun is with us, as always, Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock, and we've got a loaded show. Edgar Thompson with the Orlando Sentinel will join us a little bit later in the program, so looking forward to that. We'll talk that Jaden Rashada situation where they can't pay their quarterbacks, and that's a real big problem for Florida moving forward in recruiting, and I think pretty much locks Tennessee into the second place, the SEC East, and maybe better if they can overcome Georgia in the coming weeks and years, as a matter of fact. But recruiting is going to be very interesting for Florida after not being able to dole out the $13 million that was reportedly promised to Jaden Rashada. I talked to Edgar Thompson, who played that interview just before the show. He's a bit in a time crunch, and this, to me, is the new cardinal sin. The cardinal sin was pulling a scholarship from a player at a high school that you had evaluated as a college football prospect and one that you were willing to give an offer to. And I hate the term non-committable offer. That's just stupid. That's not an offer. But when you really offered a guy and he went away, then at that point, you can't recruit in that school ever again if you pull a scholarship. And high school coaches are going to talk. This is notorious in the Atlanta area. The other terrible sin that you just couldn't get away from is if you pushed a guy off the roster. Well, let me tell you, those are now a part of college football that are just business as usual. What is not business as usual is promising a young man $13 million and then it is not there. So, Caleb Calhoun, good morning. How are you, sir?
Doing great. How are you doing this morning, Dave?
I'm well. Visit with Edgar Thompson. We'll play that a little bit later in the program. Edgar's got a tough job today. He's actually going to a golf show, so he covers golf as well. So he gets to study the new equipment that was out. So we were fortunate enough to get a few minutes with him, and he's as good as they come. But the new unforgivable sin is not having the cash there that you promised. Can you imagine where Tennessee would be with Nico and all the positivity that's around that now that he's on campus if the money wasn't there and he was transferring out? Not only would it hurt you with Nico, it would hurt you with prospects down the line. I'm still blown away. This is something to me that the University of Buffalo or Maine or something like that does. This is not something that an upper tier program, and I'd have Florida in the top 25 or so programs in the nation. You just don't pull this off, Caleb, and not expect severe repercussions of which we'll never know the full extent of.
Yeah, and Florida, I mean, not to throw academics in, but Florida's technically a public Ivy. You'd think they'd be a little bit better with money than they are as a public Ivy. We talked about it yesterday. They clearly rushed together an NIL collective because they realized what was happening with other schools. It didn't make sense for them to be behind the curve and then within a month have one of the top five NIL collectives, and they weren't ready. And that's just the fact of the matter. And we're criticizing Billy Napier for his lack of attention to detail. Where I will defend him is this is somewhat of an administrative issue more than I think a lot of it has to do with the administration and the infrastructure of that school at the time. I think you and I have talked in that. There was all former. He had a lot of administrative advantages in the 90s where anybody could have secured top 5 classes in Tennessee back then. And I think that for Billy Napier, what he's, they're technically supposed to be separate from NIL coaches. We know they're not. But this is more the school, I think, than maybe yourself. But it's a problem. It's a problem for the program, and I don't know if we're going to recover from this anytime soon.
No, and it just seems as much as anything. And Caleb, we're having a bit of trouble with your connection, so if we can get you reconnected, that would be great. Let me have you bounce out and come right back in. Typically takes care of everything. But here is the issue that I think that Florida has is a true lack of communication with the athletic department and the individual collectives. Now, technically, when it comes to offering prospects some sort of financial inducement, even in the NIL days, you're not supposed to do that. But let's be honest. I think it would be very silly for us to think that Josh Heupel doesn't have the Spire Group and any other collective on speed dial and that they are working together. And the simple fact is not working together leads, based off what Edgar Thompson said, to something like this. You have to work together in some shape, form, or fashion. You can't expect your collective to be out there just doling out cash to kids that really you may not even want. So the whole concept, Caleb, that the NCAA has out there, that this is a separation of church and state, so to speak, that the school does the recruiting and the collective is somehow magically tipped off, is just really, really silly. But if it appears as if, from talking to Edgar, and we'll get to that interview, please hit like if you want to bring more people into the program. We would greatly appreciate that. Big subscriber day yesterday, so be sure and subscribe as well. But Caleb, I'll be frank with you. I was stunned by the conversation with Edgar. Again, we'll get to that. But he's talking about these collective groups have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, hundreds of thousands of dollars is good at Utah. I mean, that's not good as an SEC school. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. There seems to be a whole different scale, and I credit Tennessee in what they're doing as opposed to what other top schools are doing. I think Georgia and Alabama are fine, but they also can fall back on the fact that you can get great coaching. You can go on to the NFL. You're probably going to win championships. Tennessee doesn't have that yet. So you have to rely on NIL if you're any other school not named Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan. I mean, you haven't proven that you can be a perennial playoff team. So the NIL is a separator right now. And so far it's separating Tennessee from Florida at the very least. And I would say a lot more schools as well.
Yeah, I agree. How's my connection now? Just checking.
You're much better. You're golden. Perfect.
What I was going to say is that, look, this is a difference between who is Florida's athletic director now. It's not Jeremy Foley. Do we know who?
It's Scott Strickland from Mississippi State.
Okay. So this is really where the difference comes in, honestly. Danny White is ahead of the curve and was ahead of the curve with this, and you're seeing it. Whereas with Florida and Scott Strickland, you're not seeing it. Maybe that's the issue of coming from a school like Mississippi State. Dave, I got a question for you. Do you think this would have been any issue if Jeremy Foley were athletic director of Florida?
I would have said no, but I'll point out one thing that Edgar Thompson said. He said Jeremy Foley was very against NIL in general, the pay-for-play whole concept. So possibly. And then I'll offer this as well. Jeremy Foley did allow Florida to get way, way behind in facilities over the past 10 or so years. So I, at one point, thought that Jeremy Foley was hands down when they had Billy Donovan and they had Steve Spurrier and, they went on to Urban Meyer. I thought he was hands down the best AD in the country. In retrospect, I don't think he was ready for the changes that came in college football.
That actually can make sense. I would have just thought that Jeremy Foley, even if he was against NIL, would have been smart enough to accept it when it came.
I don't think he would have allowed this public embarrassment. Let's put it that way.
Right. And so I think that, sometimes that's the biggest difference is, who's running the ship at the time. And again, I talked about it yesterday, when Danny White was at UCF, guys, I'm saying right now, UCF is on the verge of becoming a blue blood college football program in the next few years because of what Danny White did when he was athletic director there. He's now at Tennessee. That is beyond Josh Heupel. That's the best hire Tennessee has made the past 25 years, Danny White. That I don't think we can oversell how great of a hire he is. And Tennessee, you knew, was going to be ahead of the curve on this, specifically because of that. I would also add, Danny White had a great point a year ago, and I've always talked about this. He said, and Dave, you know this, Tennessee's at its best, not when they're clinging to tradition, which they have a tendency to do sometimes if you look back through history. They're at their best when they are the ones breaking tradition. You know, Tennessee was the first or second school to have a black player on their team. You know, they embraced Title IX in the 70s, which is why their women's basketball program became elite. When they fell behind was when they refused to move on from the single wing in football, or when they refused to put lights at Neyland Stadium, or when they refused to update their facilities in the 70s or go national in recruiting. Or over the past 10, 15 years, I would say one of the reasons they fell behind in football is they kept going for the pro-style football coach who's a great administrator and a great recruiter. And quite honestly, I think that Danny White has learned that they are at their best when they stay ahead of the curve. And Florida doesn't seem to get that yet.
No, it goes so far as to there was uncertainty on signing day, the first signing day, which is really the significant one now, that reporters are sitting around waiting for Billy Napier to come to the podium. And the rumor that started to spread was that Jaden Rashada had not signed his letter of intent. And really, Florida would have been better off that day had he just not signed it and avoided this embarrassment back in December. But you are where you are, and I can't imagine what goes through a young man's head or a family's head when they're considering Florida, Miami, and Tennessee. So Miami has good booster money. I've been told that Tennessee has incredible booster money. I know. And then you've got Florida, who is somebody promised the guy $13 million. I don't know who that was. I don't know if Billy Napier was even aware of it, but that's almost worse. I mean, it would be almost better if the collective came to Billy Napier and said, sorry, we let you down. We couldn't come up with $13 million. But just to have this uncertainty of who was communicating with who seems almost worse to me, Caleb. They don't know what's going on. Who's calling the shots? Who's the chief?
You're so right. It kind of reminds me of, did you ever watch the Pony Excess, the story of SMU in the 80s?
I've seen parts of it.
So it was very clear by the time the program went like south with SMU, I guess, was it Rick Meyer was the head coach? Had no idea what was going on, was just kind of letting it happen at the time. And you feel like Florida, Billy Napier's that way. Detail-oriented Billy Napier's that way with Florida. That is the criticism of him, because
sick of hearing that term.
Yeah, Nick Saban would never have let boosters control him like that. I'm just going to be honest. And I think that's one of the big differences.
Totally agree. So we'll get to that interview with Edgar Thompson. Smoky Mountain Red said, please, please, please let Florida go through an extended downturn. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, Smoky Mountain Red, that it's going to happen at least for one recruiting cycle, and don't be surprised if it happens for two. And in all honesty, it just, when you look at coaches, be it Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Josh Heupel, even Shane Beamer to some extent, who I'm not high on, doesn't it seem like they have the modern day wherewithal to be able to handle those sorts of things? I mean, doesn't it seem like that Billy Napier, to me, is behind the curve, maybe even before this happens? So we'll get to that Edgar Thompson interview here in just a second. Brought to you in part by Vols Automotive Group, the epicenter of car shopping right there in Callahan. Vols Automotive Group is fantastic, and you're going to love it because they want what they need, and they appreciate your business, and they treat you as a fantastic customer. The other thing at Vols Automotive Group that they do that is so phenomenal is they handle your service department. So if you need a little bit of work done, they'll take care of that, and you don't have to worry about being overcharged. They're phenomenal. And I remind you that Zool Beer is the official craft beer of Off the Hook Sports. XULbeer.com. Zool Beer Company. It's in downtown Knoxville with just fantastic parking. You can go there, have a great time, have a burger, and you're going to love Zool Beer. Go to ZoolBeer.com. Great merch as well. So check them out. So coming up, that Edgar Thompson interview, how bad off is Florida and how much does that help Tennessee? I'm just going to tell you, it's a lot. Back in just 3 minutes. Hang tight with me, and you want to hear this Edgar Thompson interview coming up in just a moment.
Family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Inflation has risen to the highest level in over 40 years, according to the April 2022 U.S. Inflation Calculator. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings due to inflation? Simply stated, if the cost of goods and services are 8% higher and you're only earning 4% in your investments, that money buys you less of what you need. Right now is the time to act. Call Guardian Investment Advisors today.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant.
It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes, folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Welcome back. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. We'll bring him back on board as Edgar Thompson coming up. But first, a game that I want to play. Edgar Thompson is with the Orlando Sentinel, and he's as befuddled by Florida's handling of their quarterback situation, Jaden Rashada, as anybody else, and it's absolutely bizarre. So the spring semester officially started yesterday. Spring semester early enrollees from the 2023 class: linebacker Arian Carter of Smyrna, Tennessee; defensive back Christian Conyer of Bowling Green, Kentucky; tight end Ethan Davis of Atlanta; defensive back Ricky Gibson III of Trussville, Alabama; place kicker Max Gilbert of Memphis; defensive lineman Caleb Herring; defensive lineman David Hobbs; quarterback Nico Iamaleva; offensive lineman Larry Johnson III; offensive lineman Bison Lane; wide receiver Nathan Laycock; defensive back Jack Luttrell; defensive back Jordan Matthews; defensive lineman Nathan Robinson; wide receiver Cameron Selden; defensive back John Slaughter; linebacker Jalen Smith; linebacker Jeremiah Tellender; and offensive lineman Shamarad Umarov. Let me tell you quickly what I'm hearing about these guys at this point. Ethan Davis, now this is just going through light workouts, and some were participants in the bowl practice leading up to the Orange Bowl. I mean, Ethan Davis, just an incredible athlete, is going to have to mold into a tight end position, but athletically brings every bit to the table that Princeton Fant did, and maybe more. Hearing nothing but great things from David Hobbs, which you would expect. I don't think that's a surprise. And then we get to some of the guys that it's just a couple of things I've already heard about some people. I think Bison Lang needs to, work on his athleticism a little bit. I think that's going to continue to be something that he'll get better at. So already getting some feedback about some of these guys. But I want to get to the midterm guys. So I want to play a little game. Are you up for a game? Caleb Calhoun, are you enthused? Are you excited? Are you fired up?
Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. Hit that like button if you want more people to be on board. It certainly helps us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, yesterday was a big subscription day, so we really appreciate that. It's brought to you by Guardian Investment Advisors, GIAPlantoday.com, GIAPlantoday.com. And when it comes to financial strategy, they not only show you where to put your money, but why you're putting it there. So we're going to play a little game thanks to GIAPlantoday.com. And by the way, with video teleconferencing, you can get the absolute best financial and advisement anywhere on the planet. So I want to play a little game, and we're going to call it starter. Let's call it start, bench, scrub. Okay. So we're going to look at the start, bench, scrub. So start means you start a game this season, and it can be injury or not, but you start a game this season. Bench means the typical college football model where you'd sit a season, get used to college football play, and that's all understandable. And then you end up playing some ways down the line. Maybe it's next year, the year after. And then the last thing is scrub, which means that Josh Heupel is going to push him out the door in January. So I'm sorry it happens now. Used to, if you said that, I would get like a call from Philip Fulmer said I'd never do such a thing. But nowadays, that's not the case. So we're going to play starter, bench, scrub. Okay, so starter, bench, scrub. So here we go. We've got a music bed that we've used before that we love. So here we go. The pressure's on. I'll ask Caleb Calhoun, starter, bench, scrub. And we're going to talk about the 4 players that have transferred in at midterm. Okay? The transfers that played at another college, not the high school kids, although I might throw some high school kids in there. But I want to focus on the 4 that are in right now. So let's go McAllen Castles, tight end from UC Davis. Starter, bench, scrub.
Going to go scrub because I think McAllen Castles was brought in for depth, and I think Ethan Davis is going to take the shine away from him and be the one to replace Princeton Fant.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to go on the other end of the spectrum. I'll say starter because I think they pretty much start 2 tight ends. So I'm going to go with starter. They swap drives is the way they did it last year. I'm going to say Ethan Davis isn't ready yet, but by midseason, you may very well be right. I think I'll be right in the beginning of the season. So I'll say starter.
You're just biased to FCS football players, Dave.
I do what?
I said you're just biased to FCS football players. You love those guys coming from those small schools, don't you?
I cannot get enough FCS. If my wife says it once, she said it a million times. All right. So linebacker Keenan Pili, he is a starter, bench, scrub.
Easiest call ever, starter. Starter day 1. He's not even going to get groomed behind anybody. He's starting immediately.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's kind of that he's going to allow Aaron Beasley to play a little bit more free on the outside. And I think he's going to be that lockdown between the tackles type of linebacker. So that one was pretty easy. All right, so we'll move along. We both got Keenan Pili as a starter. Andre Carrick, offensive lineman. Andre Carrick from BYU. Your thoughts on Andre?
No, he's from Texas.
No, I'm sorry. Keenan Pili was from BYU. So let's go with Andre Carrick. What do you think? Starter, bench, scrub?
This is a shot in the dark for me because it comes down to him and another offensive lineman, and one of the transfers is going to start at right tackle. So flipping this coin, I'm going to go Andre Carrick. He's going to be the starter at right tackle. He was the one that Josh Heupel and the staff targeted first, and I think they did that for a reason.
I think he's the starter too. I've heard a lot of good things just in the short time that he's been on campus. So I think he's a starter as well. So we agree on that one. Now, let's go to the next. Place kicker Charles Campbell. Starter, bench, scrub.
Starter. Chase McGrath is gone. Charles Campbell's a proven kicker. So I'm going to go starter.
Yep, you would think so. All right, so I want to run through a couple of these high school guys. Now, those are midterm guys, so you expect them to all be starters, and if they're not, that's a problem. But I'm going to run through a couple of high school guys as they started class yesterday, and if you want me to tackle one of them I don't mention, then go right ahead. But one that you mentioned, Ethan Davis. Again, I'm not on board maybe as much as you that he starts right away. I think he ends up being an impact player and a fantastic tight end at Tennessee. I just don't see it immediately. I think he needs a little bit of molding, but eventually I think he'll be the type of athletic tight end that, my goodness, when's the last time they've had a really, really athletic tight end?
Athletic tight end where they had
the hot kid, maybe?
Michael Rivera, maybe, would you say?
Maybe. Yeah, I think this guy's more athletic than that. I'm trying to think back. Gosh, I don't want to go all the way back to Jason Witten. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody.
Yeah, after Witten, there was Brad Cottom, I remember, for a little while. Luke Stalker.
Luke was a pretty good pass catcher. Okay, if he's Luke Stalker or better, I think you're happy with that. But I actually think he's more athletic than that. Obviously, Nico, we've discussed this a lot. Starter, bench, scrub. He's not going to be a scrub. I think he starts before the end of the season. I think he starts going into October.
I think he should start going to the end of October because I think he's going to be better than Milton. But I say bench because I say that Heupel is going to give Milton every reason to keep the job.
Okay, so out of the defensive backs, John Slaughter, Jordan Matthews, Jack Luttrell, who am I leaving out? Ricky Gibson III. Who out of that group is most likely to be a starter?
Ooh, I would probably go with. That's a tough one, because I'm going to go Ricky Gibson because he was pretty highly touted and he plays cornerback. And there's, although Jordan Matthews does play cornerback too and was pretty highly touted, I will say that. But it's one of those two because I think one of the cornerbacks is going to be. Cornerback is where they have some real issues. So one of them is going to start, I think. I don't think either of them will start the whole season, but I think one of them is bound to start some games this year.
I'll take Matthews because I know that some big programs, especially Texas and LSU, were incredibly high on him. So hit that like button. We appreciate it. It brings more people into the show. And thank you for those that subscribed yesterday. Please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Smoky Mountain Red said I was a fan of Napier when his name was in the mix for us, but it appears we dodged another bad hire by not going him as our head coach. We finally hit with an AD and head coach after 2 decades of despair. Wasn't quite that long, but it was a decade, solid decade of despair. Yeah, Billy Napier was a very, very hot name on a lot of coaching lists. And Caleb, I just went into SEC Media Days, and the positivity was so strong about Billy Napier at Florida. I'm kind of one that's I guess just by nature, I second guess some things, and I thought, man, it seems like a lot of people are being really, really kind to him based off what he was able to do at Louisiana, and I just wasn't sold yet. I think that's a major jump. I think Florida, unlike the other big name programs, has issues from an administration standpoint. You talk about a long downturn, Smoky Red. This could turn into a long downturn of a head coach that's not prepared at this level, it might turn into a long downturn of an AD who's not prepared at this level. Scott Stallings, nothing against sports information directors, but you don't often see guys move up from handling reporters to handling an entire athletic department. That doesn't usually happen. As a matter of fact, I've never heard of it. I thought that was a really aggressive, strange, odd hire when Florida made that. He may do great. I like Scott on a personal level. There's just a lot of things you have to take care of other than getting the media guide together every year, Caleb.
Yeah, and that's why I say Tennessee is in a unique position. I just went back and looked at history through Tennessee athletic directors. And I mean, I really believe that Danny White is the first athletic director Tennessee's had that thinks way ahead of the curve. Quite honestly, I think Mike Hamilton was a very standard AD, made, standard hires. Same with Dave Hart. And outside of Mike Hamilton and Dave Hart, and then a 6-month period with John Curry, most of Tennessee's athletic directors are former head coaches. I mean, let's even go back to somebody like Doug Dickey. Dave, let's be honest, was Doug Dickey like, you're talking about a former coach, but even you've talked about, he didn't even care to invest in the basketball program at all.
Didn't care at all.
Yeah.
No, was perfectly fine with Wade Houston watching soap operas during the day.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have, and before Doug Dickey, you had Bob Woodruff, who was there for 22 years, who helped Tennessee get a bit ahead of the curve starting in the late 70s. But I know enough information to know that was really Johnny Majors pushing him. For those who don't know, Woodruff played for General Neyland in the 30s. And, most of Tennessee's history has been their athletic department being run by former players and former coaches, honestly. And it hasn't produced the best results when that's happened, to be fair.
Zach England of Best and Brock. Zach's got your back. He'll bring you Ron Slay tomorrow. And Zach is one of the best personal injury attorneys in all of Tennessee. And Zach is based out of Chattanooga. He can go toe-to-toe with any of those insurance company lawyers that, they don't want to give you any money, even if it was their fault. They don't care. So Zach England of Best and Brock. Zach's got your back. Travis says Billy Napier has a punchable face. So the guys that are on the message board, if you could get away with punching one person in the SEC and you could get away with it and you wouldn't get beat up, when Edward Duran was in the SEC, I would not suggest that.
He would punch back.
Yeah, that might not go well. And he might enjoy it, which makes it even worse when you get beat up and they enjoy it. You at least want the guy to feel the pain a little bit. Most punchable face on our message board. Go ahead and throw that out there. We might throw that out there as today's tough question. Who would you most like to punch in the SEC and get away with it?
And we don't advocate violence. We should say that up front.
Or maybe we do. But yeah, no, we don't advocate violence, but just most punchable face. Who would you most like to punch and get away with it? Travis. Travis took mine. Travis said, that's definitely Drinkwitz.
No, you guys are all wrong. There's an obvious one, and it's because he's a horrible human being, and it's Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze.
Oh, okay.
I wish nothing but bad fortune for him for the rest of his life. I cannot stand him. Hugh Freeze, when I covered recruiting in 2015 and 2014, was one of those guys. And first of all, for those who don't know, coached at a Christian school down the road from where I grew up. And then he was the ultimate annoying throw the I'm super religious in your face type of guy when he was trying to win recruits over for Ole Miss. Meanwhile, he was cheating. He had the prostitution scandal. Then he goes to Liberty's is trying to be the Protestant version of Notre Dame, we're holier than thou because we're this moral majority Protestant. But, they hire somebody who covered up for the Baylor scandal in 2015. They hire Hugh Freeze. And yeah, everything about Freeze is hypocrisy and despicable. I cannot stand him. And guys, as long as I'm on the show, I will never say a nice thing about him.
Yeah, and Travis said note to self, stay on Caleb's good side. The other thing, 2015 was his super class, wasn't it?
I thought it was like 2013, wasn't it?
Okay, yeah, he got the one class that had Robert Kimdichie in it, and then he had another really good defensive back that was out of Mississippi. This is while he was at Ole Miss, obviously. So you're kind of rolling with that. Kimdichie had a brother. Okay, I get it. And then he had another really highly touted receiver that had like a cousin. So you're like, okay, this is all lining up for Hugh Freeze. I get it. And then the one, though, that made 0 sense is why Laramie Tunsil would go to Ole Miss instead of Alabama, where they produce offensive linemen like they're fruit in Florida. I mean, it was just absolutely unbelievable that Tunsil would decide to go there. That's the one that blew me away.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's true. That was always shady how it was happening. And I'm going to be honest, I don't mind shady recruiting tactics if it's to the players. I didn't mind it then. I don't care now. I don't really care that Gene Chizik gave Cam Newton $180,000 to go win a national title at Auburn.
Let's remember, too, it wasn't only kind of shady. It was real shady because Tunsil in the draft, when he had the bong mask on, later admitted that he had taken money from Ole Miss coaches and like it was commonplace. Like he didn't even know it was a rule.
Yes. And also, let's not forget this. Hugh Freeze, when the investigation and the violations broke, to save his signing class, he and the Ole Miss administration threw Houston Nutt under the bus and created fake storylines that Houston Nutt was behind all this. They did that so the players there would stay with them through signing day. Then after the players signed, they knew it would come out that they were lying, but they didn't care because the players were stuck with them because this was pre-transfer portal. And so that was one of the snakiest moves of all. The guy's a snake. He's a snake and a liar.
Yeah, and I'm one that, and Caleb has learned this about me. I'll just tell you what I think. I don't really have an agenda. I had a person come up to me at the gym, so I'll say the same thing here that I would tell him. And he said, Josh Heupel's a good guy, though, right? And I said, well, I think that all college coaches that get to that level have some ego. I don't think there's any question about it. I think you could debate whether or not pushing guys out the door is okay, but nowadays it's commonplace. So, yeah. On that scale, I mean, I don't think he's a priest, by any stretch.
No.
None of these guys are. But I think he is one of the absolute better people in college football from everything I hear. And how fortunate is Tennessee to have an AD that's forward thinking, to have an AD that gets things done, to have a coach that's forward thinking and a good guy. And and an offensive wizard. I mean, I don't think things get much better there. And you've got Florida who can't figure out how to pay their players, even though it's legal now. So I just think Tennessee's in a great spot. Now you have the big bugaboo right there in Georgia, and they're going to have to overcome that. But still, I mean, I just from top to bottom, you mentioned White. I thought of Heupel. They're just in great shape.
Yes, I think the two of them together are in incredible shape. They know they're very in sync. I think both are ahead of the curve in their own ways. And you're right. They both appear to be decent guys relative to the sport. You're right. I mean, like every great coach is going to push the rules a little bit to try to, do what they want to do. I think sometimes the funniest part is that like sometimes to me, the greatest humans who were coaches don't always come across as the best because they're the most honest. I've said that for years about Steve Spurrier. I feel like Steve Spurrier is actually just a great guy, but because he was so honest about who he was, it kind of came across and rubbed people the wrong way, but I respected it. And
one of the most honest things he said that you could say was one of the dumbest when he said, I'll just up and retire one day when I'm done with it. And sure enough, he did. That's exactly what he did. And when he got towards 10 years, I remember him saying publicly, 10 years is usually long enough to be at a job. And I'm thinking no coach says that. Why? Because they want recruits to think they'll be there for 5 years. But Steve Spurrier is just so candid. It was fantastic. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. That's where you need to find your next realtor. They are phenomenal. Over 40 years of experience in that office. And AndyMasonRealEstate.com will make sure that you're well taken care of because they offer the best prices and they offer the best service in the industry. That's AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Your stop for real estate, selling or buying in Knoxville. So check them out at AndyMasonRealEstate.com. So we'll get to Edgar Thompson here just momentarily of the Orlando Sentinel. He's going to tell you just how bad things are at Florida and they're bad. And Edgar's completely honest and has been a fantastic reporter covering that program for years. So stay tuned more after this. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports. 3 minutes.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassy Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassy, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassy's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassy Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Calhoun Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth.
Smoky Mountain Red says, I will not be shocked if Hugh fails at Auburn. Man, flip side, and I agree with everything that Caleb said. I'll be shocked if he doesn't have success at Auburn.
I will too. I hate to admit that. As much as I can separate things, Hugh Freeze is a great offensive mind. He's an offensive genius. And he won't have to take part in as many scandals to get players at Auburn as he did at Ole Miss.
True. Big Orange Phillies right there on Maynardville Pike. Big Orange Phillies has great food. It has just fantastic place to hang out and watch some ball as playoffs are ongoing. And well, like most years, that won't involve the Dallas Cowboys any longer. But you can still go down and check it out at Big Orange Phillies on Maynardville Pike, close to Maynardville, close to North Knoxville. You'll love Big Orange Phillies. And Big Orange Phillies also has billiards, darts, and cornhole. So if the game gets out of hand or the Cowboys play like total trash, then you've got something else to do. That's Big Orange Phillies on Maynardville Pike. So I visited with Edgar Thompson this morning. He works with the Orlando Sentinel. He covers the Florida Gators, and he gave us a lot of great insight into how bad off it is at the University of Florida now that Jaden Rashada has been released. He signed, and now he's gone because his $13 million wasn't there. Please like the channel now. Hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do that. But this is an incredibly insightful conversation with Edgar Thompson, who was just phenomenal to make time with us on short notice. Here he is, Off the Hook Sports. All right, let's talk a little bit of Florida. There are all kinds of things going on there. Edgar Thompson joins us from the Orlando Sentinel, and he knows the Gators as much as anyone. We're in this, Edgar. First of all, thanks for making the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, happy to do it. It's been a while. I tell you, it's a professional setup, man. I like this.
Thank you, thank you. We're doing
Yeah.
we're doing what we can. So
Yeah, good.
this whole video aspect has been an interesting challenge for us. I'll just give you that.
Sure.
Edgar, speaking of a challenge, Jaden Rashada was supposed to be a Gator. He's not a Gator. What can you tell us about what happened with that NIL pledge that apparently didn't have any weight to it?
Oh, it's just been a nonstop drama, man. It is, I'm hoping we're past the Rashada drama. I'm not sure. I'll get to that once I kind of lay out the principles a bit for you and the listeners. Jaden Rashada committed to Miami in late June, and the Gators were hot on his trail. He's a California high schooler, Northern California, top quarterback prospect, and he's 5, 6, 7, depending on what service you look at. Real natural thrower of the football, very talented, and needs to build up his body and some things, but he's got a lot of upside. He really can make some tough throws. Not everyone can. So the Gators were, left at the altar and pretty unhappy about it. And the rumor was Miami, which has the backing of this billionaire. He did Life Wallet, I think's the company. John Ruiz was funding this massive NIL deal for Rashada at $9.5 million, which we're like, what? So Nico, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, is coming to Tennessee. How do you pronounce it?
Yamaleva is the best I can do right now.
Oh, my God. Well, that was a lot better than I would have ever done, so I'm not going to try. So $8 million is the rumor on him. I guess the going rate now in the name, image, and likeness age is $1 million up front, $1 million a year for the top guys, and it could be more. Pretty obscene numbers, crazy. Anthony Richardson made about $1.5 million last year for the Gators, is what we believe and have heard. So you get paid, man, if you're a quarterback at a blue blood program now, and that's how it works. Well, I think the Gator Collective, which is a group of people that raise money to facilitate name, image, and likeness deals for athletes of all sports, not just football. I think they've done about 150 deals, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're headed by a gentleman, and I don't want to get into a bunch of names because truly, Dave, I wonder, these people in some of these areas are going to be like rats in a corner at some point because there could be lawsuits coming and things like that. And I don't need me putting names out and getting involved in litigation. But there are people that run these collectives, own them, whatever. And I believe it got into a contest of like who can like get this kid, tug of war. And they overdid it on whatever the deal was. And they somehow got involved in a deal paying at least $13 million. Now, it was probably incentive laden. It was over years. So who knows what the upfront money probably was $1 million, but the kid could have made a lot of money playing football at Florida. Well, the problem is the collective doesn't have a lot of money. I don't even know if they've ever even raised $1 million total. So they're promising, they're writing checks they can't cash, apparently. And this thing, they tried to terminate the deal in early December. So then they made this offer and the kid flipped his commitment November 10th. He was in the swamp November 12th against South Carolina. His father was telling people, oh, my son is just happy to be at the school he always wanted to be at. Wasn't talking about money, NIL deals, anything like that.
So, just to clarify, he flipped from Miami where he was to Florida.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of, so it went Miami commit June, flip November 10th. Then they had this deal, terminated the deal in December 7th, in fact. Signing day arrives December 21. Billy Napier's press conference is dragging. I mean, it wasn't starting. It was going, we were waiting and waiting and waiting longer than usual. Well, the rumor was Rashada hadn't signed yet. And we're thinking, oh my God, is this kid going to bail on his commitment today? which would just be a nightmare. Well, that would have been the best thing to happen in retrospect because the nightmare was to come when this surfaced. And I reported the details in the 13 million before anybody. I heard, I mean, it was out there and he hadn't enrolled in school and yada, yada. And then, so we found out what happened. Well, January 3rd, so the enrolled date was January 9th, I believe. January 3rd, Rashada was at the Under Armour game in Orlando. And I talked to the kid. He was like great personality, funny. He has an American Bulldog back in California. He wasn't able to bring with him. And we're like, oh, really? Will we ever bring him? His name's Biggie, like after the rap star. And he's like, oh, I might bring him next year. We're going to redshirt him a year, which I thought was clever. He's great. So we were like, oh, cool. He's going to be fun to deal with. Never showed up to campus. He was coming from Orlando to Gainesville, which is where I live. And, you know, it's an hour and a half drive. Never came, went straight back to California, and the drama began. And where we are now is the young man asked for a release from his national letter of intent. It was fine. It was granted after a couple of days. I don't know what agreements and things were made. I mean, there isn't like a financial agreement. UF isn't going to pay this kid to get out of his deal. The collective is going to have to pay him something, you would think. Is there going to be a lawsuit against the collective? Are they going to push for their money? Are they going to push for 13 million? What are they going to ask for? Meanwhile, the kid's visiting schools. He visited Colorado. He and Coach Prime and the guy's father, Harlan, would be a good little pairing there, grouping. Arizona State, Washington, we've heard, and there might have been another school. The kid's talented, and he'll go on with his life, but this will always kind of be following him, or we'll be following him for a good while, and we'll see where he gets. But it's going to haunt, I believe, Billy Napier in this program for a while because it looked inept. It was an embarrassment, and it's going to be used negatively on the recruiting trail against him. How wouldn't you?
It to me is worse than the old cardinal sins that are okay now. And the cardinal sins used to be, because I covered recruiting for way too long, but it was pulling a scholarship from a young man for just performance during his senior year. Then you couldn't go back into that high school ever again. And the other one was pushing a kid out the door that couldn't play currently on your roster. Nowadays, that's just business. Those two things happen all the time. This is the new cardinal sin. Promising a young man money and it's not there when he shows up. That's bad, Edgar.
Well, so I told you, you know, off camera, I'm heading down to the PGA merchandise show and I'll be covering some Florida swing. In fact, Liv, the golf league, Liv, just announced it's coming to Orlando in late March, the week before the Masters, right?
Wow.
So I'm going to be covering, I'm a golf guy. I'm going to the PGA. I'm doing all this. I covered the LPGA tournament in Orlando for a couple days. Lee Trevino had a famous line, pressure's when you show up to the golf course playing for, you know, $50 a hole and you got 5 in your pocket, right? Or whatever it is. But that was Trevino because he was so confident and cocky and he'd probably win. But you can't be, you know, showing up with $5 in your pocket and promising a kid $50 to come play for your school. And I don't think Napier had any involvement in this deal, first of all. He would have put the kibosh on this thing instantly. Scott Strickland, the AD here, respected guy, great gentleman to deal with. These men, and Billy's been great. He's a man of integrity. I mean, that's one thing about Billy. You get, I mean, it's all about like the experience for the player, the brotherhood. I mean, it gets a little tiresome to listen to him talking about this stuff, life-changing experience. He wants to pay the players on his team. He wants the guys who are doing the work, who are producing, to reap the rewards of this name, image, and likeness stuff. He doesn't want to be pay for play, but that's what it's becoming. And the collectives are running off doing this. And the problem, Dave, is it's third-party people, third-party affiliations that are doing their thing under the umbrella of the athletics department. Former AD Jeremy Foley said to me, and Mark Long, the Associated Press writer here one time, he's like, these collectives, man, it's like they're out there raising money for the Florida Gators. I don't know that I want people that aren't working for the university raising money for the Gators. It's very complicated. They're going to have to figure this stuff out. We're not even 2 years into NIL, but I don't know how they change the legislation. I don't know if you put the, genie back in the bottle. I don't know how you do it. And then can you restrict the payment of these players? I mean, this is America. You can't.
No, you can't. And something you said to me that really stood out. So I don't know how familiar you are with Tennessee, and they've got a group called the Spire Group. They're literally raising, no exaggeration, millions, if not tens of millions. You use the number hundreds of thousands. When I look at Tennessee and Florida and a group of other programs, I consider them the upper end of the SEC. So why does Florida not have their NIL ducks in a row when schools like Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, even though they don't admit to it, they do have their NIL ready to go? Why is Florida not in that same position? That's befuddling.
Yeah, I'm all over the map a little. My chronology earlier was a little confusing too. But one thing I didn't mention, there's an ancillary group to the collective, which is more like the local muni. And then there's the country club. I don't know what the best golf course in your area is, but let's say Seminole, which is like an esteemed course in South Florida. It's like Seminole versus a local muni I might play here. The Gator Guard is the country club group. It's $1 million buy-in. And there's several guys in that paying $1 million just to be in it. A lot of wealth in that. And the thought is we're expected to back this deal, but it wasn't ever signed. I mean, the contract was not signed by anybody that had that kind of money. The deal was signed by the Rashada family and a member of the collective, and that's it, based on the reporting of others. I haven't seen the contract, but that was reported by others. So, yeah, the thing's a mess, man. And it's like, we're talking here, and it sucked all the oxygen out of the room on this conversation, too. It's like Billy Napier's meeting with the media next Wednesday, I assume, for signing day, even though they only got like one guy. They have some transfers to talk about. It's going to be a bunch of Rashada questions because these coaches, I don't know how Josh Heupel is, they don't talk like ever when they don't have to. When they're not in season, it would behoove Billy, in my opinion, to get out and talk about this, even if it's off the record, just to get it talked about before we go in next Wednesday and start hammering on this topic exclusively. It's, I don't know how you get the yoke off of you if you're Florida and you move on from this. I guess, time heals, but it's going to be interesting to see how it impacts the future recruiting class here at Florida. The good news for Billy, he has a commitment from 5-star DJ Lagway. He's a kid from Willis, Texas. I think that's north of Houston, an hour or so. And he's all in on the Gators, and he's talking about helping put together this great class. And he wants to have a Pied Piper effect like Chris Leak did years ago in 2003 when Ron Zook signed the #1 class. It began with Chris Leak signing, and he lured a lot of guys here.
Wow. Let me ask you this, and I'll leave you this because I know you've got the golf tournament to cover, and I'm a little bit jealous. But as opposed to 12 months ago, how do you feel about Billy Napier now in 2023 as opposed to January 2022? Because everybody thought that was a fantastic hire, and it's kind of gone a little shaky since then.
Yeah, I mean, the jury's still out, obviously, on the long-term prospects of the Gators. And I went to Chatsworth, which is up there near Chattanooga. It's northwest Georgia, over by Dalton.
Yeah.
Carpet capital. So I did a big story on him, met with his people from his hometown, really enjoyed it. The guy's got tremendous moral fiber. He's great upbringing. The praise is endless for him just as a person, and you can see that. And he's very smart, very organized guy, very determined recruiter, which is something they needed. They needed organization. They needed better recruiting. The football wasn't great at times, but was that the talent? Was that Anthony Richardson not making checks at the line, completing certain passes you needed to make. I mean, Anthony's inaccuracy held back that offense some, but he also added some in that offense with his explosiveness just to be able to take off and run for 50 yards for a touchdown on any play. So I don't know. But yes, in terms of play callings, there's some clock management questions. Just the brand of football wasn't that fun to watch. The recruiting was good, but they didn't hit on all cylinders at the end like you thought they might close strongly, and really didn't. The work in the portal's been good, but not overwhelming. Hasn't been underwhelming, but that would be my overall theme so far is I'm a little underwhelmed. Now, plenty of time, but next year's schedule is no picnic. I mean, this could be a 3-year deal, but what, you're going to tell me 22 months from now, you got to wait. If I'm a fan, I got to wait 22 months to see the results. You know how it is in this world, man. People want things like this. I mean, the impatience is incredible. So Billy is already losing some fans, but I think the real hardcore fans who are willing to be patient and take the long view and recognize the positives think that he can get the job done. We'll see. I mean, the SEC has improved immeasurably, and the East is tough now, and Tennessee's part of that equation now, and the Gators are lagging, man.
Just to sum it up, Florida hired Jeremy Pruitt. Florida, that's exactly who they hired. They hired Jeremy Pruitt Part 2. The game has beyond Billy Napier's reach. And it was different reasons with Pruitt, but it's just out of.
There's one big difference, though, where you're being unfair to Jeremy Pruitt, which is. This is what I said. I'm sorry?
I would hate to be unfair to Jeremy Pruitt. Go ahead.
Say what you want about him. Jeremy Pruitt was two things. He was a defensive guru, and he was a master at scouting talent. He could scout talent very well. I'm surprised an NFL team hasn't hired him just as a scout.
I give you that.
Billy Napier, he was never a specialist on one side of the ball. He was an offensive coordinator who got fired from Clemson as an offensive coordinator. And so Napier is more of a CEO who's not. Derek Dooley got so mad when I remember he did an interview about 6 years ago, and he got so angry when people considered him more of an administrator and not, I guess you would say, like a ball guy. But hey, let's be honest, that's what Derek Dooley was. He was an administrator. He wasn't like a guru on either side of the ball. And
yeah, my knock on Dooley from the get is, what are you a great coach at? Because I could tell you what everybody's a great coach at right now. Nick Saban was a great coach of defensive backs. Steve Spurrier was a great coach of quarterbacks and offensive systems. So usually you're great at something, and that grows a career. I didn't know what Derek Dooley was great at.
Yeah, and if you're not going to be great at anything, what you have to do is what Dabo Swinney did, which is hire the right coordinator at the right time and be in the right conference at that moment where you can really start to build your program. And I don't think Billy Napier's in a position to do that. I mean, part of that with Dabo Swinney, to be fair, was that he was able to get certain guys because they were up-and-comers. But if you're an up-and-comer, Dave, would you go to Florida right now?
No. And Sam says the Pruitt group is not the Spire group. You're absolutely right. They're not. They were nowhere close to working together from my knowledge. I mean, the NIL hadn't been in full existence then. But I will tell you what, Jeremy Pruitt wouldn't have worked with the Spire group well.
No, he wouldn't.
I mean, that you're talking about big time executive business decisions being made by Josh Heupel and the Spire group. And I'm sorry, they talk. Okay. I mean, everybody's, and then they can talk more than they used to. But oh man, classic Smoky Mountain Red saying he was good on teaching players how to take
shower habits.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, Derek Dooley shots raining down, which is always good. Bassey Lawn and Garden, man alive, it's worth the drive. They shower at Bassey Lawn and Garden, they do. And they're great to work with, open 6 days a week, year round. They've got the industrial mowers, the commercial mowers, the residential mowers in Cleveland, Tennessee. So they're worth the drive from whether or not you're talking about Knoxville, Chattanooga, or Nashville. With their buying volume, they'll save you a lot of money, especially if you're starting a business or your current business needs a fleet. Then they've got those industrial mowers that are going to last forever. The other thing that stood out to me, Travis kind of made reference to this. He said, "Who would pay Anthony Richardson for his college output?" Heck yeah! How did that guy get $1.5 million, which is what Edgar said, to basically show up and be horrible? Horrible.
That is the question of the year, quite honestly.
$1.5 million for Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, no, that's
golly.
At some point, NIL's bound to balance out, right? At some point, it's got to balance out. That we're so early in the stages of it that like people are throwing money. I think eventually they're going to have to figure out that they have to be a little more responsible with it, but I just don't think we're there yet. So just enjoy the fun.
Caleb, buddy, I thought so 2 weeks ago. I thought just simple supply and demand is going to even itself out. And I spoke to, I'm not even going to share the amount, but I spoke to a young man who's doing 3 appearances for a particular company. And it is, let's put it this way, it's closer to 5 digits than it is just for 3 appearances.
That's pretty.
Break it down by hour. He's like making Steve Jobs money or Jeff Bezos money. That is, I mean, and this is not a player that you would just, that the average fan would easily recognize.
Wow.
I thought it would start to slow down too, because you and I are involved in it with Off the Hook Sports. We do pay Jacob Ward and Cooper Mays to be on with us, and I love doing it because I love them having the extra cash, and the clients love it. We love the insight, all that. I thought it was going to start to slow down a little bit, and the money would come down, but based off what I heard about 2 weeks ago, the money's going up.
Well, here's the other story too. Not only is the money going to go up, I think it's going to go up even more in a certain way, because I think there's going to be more money to be made off of college football in the future. And what I mean by that is, I've said for the longest time, NIL benefits different programs than just fertile recruiting grounds do. I still think fertile recruiting grounds matter. I still think being in a place like Georgia or Louisiana is still a big benefit.
I agree.
But I think the other thing NIL does that no one's talking about is it's going to keep star kids in maybe urban schools that are group of 5 programs, Memphis, Cincinnati, Louisville. No, Louisville is Power 5 now, and Cincinnati's going to be Power 5. But you get what I'm referring to. There's a lot of businesses in these cities and a lot of fans of those businesses. A lot of people in those businesses that are fans of that local urban college. I know like FedEx has a ton of people who are big Memphis Tiger fans because FedEx is there.
Yeah.
They're going to throw a lot of money to keep some of those best kids who would otherwise go to Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee, to keep them at home in Memphis. And you're going to start to see talent dispersed more across the country than it is right now. And
I'm cool with that, and I hope you're right, but I don't know this. I think the amount – now, FedEx is a grand exception, okay? And there might be a company that one day Amazon gets behind with Jeff Bezos. But those mega companies behind, I don't see that, just because of the amount of people that can pledge tens of millions of dollars at a school like Tennessee. You might be right. I don't see that right this second, but I've seen a lot of things lately that it started to evolve, and everybody got in football season. And the way the Spire Group handles it is basically, if you're a player of any ilk whatsoever, you are paid a monthly stipend. So it is a monthly payment to show up a certain number of times. Now, if you say, you know, my mom's sick, or I'm out of town on spring break and they call you and you can't make it, that's fine. They're not going to hold you to every single thing they want you to go to. But if you miss 3 or 4 without a good excuse, they just cut you. So you don't get that payment anymore. So there's the motivation. So I'll give them credit. I think they've found an incredibly fair way to do this thing. And I just don't know. The thing that I'm most curious about at NIL is it's been beneficial for us. I think the negotiations with the players we work with and the players we will work with have been fair on both sides. I believe that they're happy, we're happy, everybody's happy. But I do think there is going to be a situation, and I'm not saying Nico, okay, but I'm going to use a Nico type of situation. I think there's going to be a situation where somebody promises in the tens of millions of dollars and the kid's an absolute bust. Now, at that point, they're going to want some return on their money. You can't reallocate it because the kid already has it, because you can see in the Jaden Rashada situation, he didn't trust to wait around for Florida to come up with it, right? He wasn't going to go through the spring semester and hope it rolled in May. So that's my question is, when a couple of these guys, and if you look at every single recruiting class, it's always the same. 25 guys sign, 12 to 14 are contributors, 12 to 14 are basically donkeys that go somewhere else. That's a term that coaches use. I didn't make that up. Every single year, that is the case in every class. And so what happens if you bet on the donkey instead of the thoroughbred? Then you're going to be a little upset. So I don't know how that works out. I think everybody has figured out, at least Tennessee and the Spire Group, how it works out with putting players on a retainer. They show up X number of times. And I'm cool with that. They deserve that. They deserve that 50 years ago. But the elite guys, like the Nico, the Rashadas, they get the mega bucks. If a couple of those don't come through, what happens? That's my question.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question. And, we're talking, we can go back. Tennessee's had quite a few high-profile 5-stars that didn't really pan out, and would coaches have been pressured to play them more because of their high-profile rankings.
I've talked to him about it, Jonathan Crompton, because the coaching changes and, the first 3 years of his career at Tennessee were not good. And whether it's his fault or somebody else's fault, it doesn't matter. Somebody would have been writing a check to get the exposure via Jonathan Crompton.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. That's very true. And funny enough, Lane Kiffin did the reverse in 2009. Lane Kiffin, boosters would have loved him because Lane Kiffin did everything he could to get his recruits on the field, even if they didn't belong on the field. I remember he dismissed half the team just to get some of his recruits on the field in 2009 and to sell the freshmen.
Where I think that's happening. I think that's big time. I'm not going to share the name, but I had somebody that I reached out to on Twitter. I think you have access to my Twitter account, so if you want to look it up, you can, Caleb. But I reached out to somebody on Twitter that I thought had been pushed out the door to school, and I said, would you be interested in talking about it, because it's kind of the day and age of football? And he goes, no, I still love the school. And he said, but I don't want to talk about it and create bad feelings. So you're going to have somebody that might speak out, but ultimately, now that they're getting paid, what's the fan response going to be? Tough S. Too bad. You made $1.5 million, Anthony Richardson. If you got pushed out the door, which you didn't, bad example. If you got pushed out the door, you got $1.5 million in your pocket. I work hard for $40,000 a year, says Bob down the road.
Yeah, and not only, and you're seeing that though. Did you see that there was this year a drop by like the number of juniors that left, the number of players that left before their senior year for the NFL draft dropped by like 40 or 50. It was like down in the 80s, where it was like in the 120s up to the 130s a couple of years ago. That's the other side of NIL.
The guy I really liked, Sam Hartman out of Wake, that went to Notre Dame and Tennessee didn't show a lot of interest in. I liked him a lot based off film study and based off what I'd heard. If he were going to be a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick in the NFL, he can make more NIL money, or at least comparable, at Notre Dame as the starting quarterback. 5th, it's all slotted. So 5th, 6th, 7th round, I looked it up. You're lucky to get a guaranteed contract for 3 years that amounts to about $1.5 million. You tell me he can't make that as a starting quarterback at Notre Dame?
Oh, he absolutely can. Particularly with quarterbacks, many of them carry higher value in college than they do in the NFL. Many quarterbacks carry a lot higher. Let's pretend it's the 90s for a minute. Tommy Frazier was going to make a lot more money playing college football than he ever would have made playing NFL if NIL existed in 1995.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to see that with quarterbacks, and you're also going to see it with college basketball, because college basketball is the biggest crapshoot to the NBA. It's the biggest crapshoot over who succeeds. The games are just so totally different. the NBA players are just so much better. It's insane. You don't have that big of a gap between big time college football and the NFL the way you do with big time college basketball and the NBA. So you're going to see a lot of players be able to rack up a lot of NIL money in college basketball because we could talk about it. I mean, just look at Tennessee. The Bruce Pearl run had maybe one NBA player, and that was CJ Watson, and he wasn't even drafted. Chris Lofton never made it to the NBA. He'd have been worth about $20 million in college.
Yep. Suddenly escapes me. The young man that left after last year, basketball guard, Will Short.
Kennedy Chandler?
Yeah, he should have stayed.
Yeah, NIL, he could have racked up some money. You're right. Now the tricky thing is with the NBA, if you get drafted, NBA salaries are by far the best of any sport. They got a really good union. They take care of their players. I mean, they are by far the highest paid of any sport. And they should be, because quite honestly, relative to NBA players are the most elite in their sport of any sport you can name. When you talk about the number of people across the world that want to play basketball and the number of roster spots available, NBA is by far the most elite of all the leagues. But you're taken care of better too because of that.
I love the input from everybody. Travis, Smoky Mountain Red, Sam, and a recent comment. I'm leaving some people out. Sorry about that. But a recent content said Tim Tebow would have gotten $20 million. Yes, probably. Could have probably bought Aaron Hernandez some counseling, which may have helped. Which brings us full circle to Aaron Hernandez looks like Billy Napier. That's brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. They do look alike. City Heating and Air Conditioning, integrity matters. You'll love them. They'll take care of your HVAC unit. Sam says everyone complaining about the $8 million deal with Nico, but now $2 million per year looks like a deal, which would be $6 million. But I can't. No, I mean, I think if you get 2 years from a starter in the SEC and he's a first or second team all SEC quarterback, I think that's worth $2, $3, $4 million a year. I do.
Yeah.
Sounds insane, but Caleb, that's where we are. So what do we got coming up on Off the Hook Sports today?
We're going to do a little bit more coverage of early enrollees. We're going to talk about whether or not Tennessee fans should be nervous, excited about Alabama's new offensive coordinator, because unfortunately for Tennessee, they are stuck playing Alabama, and I don't know when that's going to change. So that is going to impact them. Going to dive into a little more Nico. The more we talked about him yesterday, and it's funny we talk NIL. Dave, I don't know if there is a recruit that's ever been worthy of more excitement that Tennessee signed than Nico since Peyton Manning in 1994.
Yeah, and because of social media and everything, it might be bigger, and that sounds bizarro. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. We'll talk to you at 10 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Thank you, Caleb, and I want to be sure and thank Edgar Thompson with the Orlando Sentinel. That input was